Okay. I think we should have a walk through.
Yes.
Okay, everybody back to one.
Here's your Lance lesson. My appetite has always been to put a lot of value on the screen, and sometimes the people become somewhat diminished because of the story that surrounds them. But with E.T., I had always really wanted to tell the story of a disenfranchised and lonely boy in a relationship with siblings, a sister, a brother. I had 3 younger sisters. And I also wanted to tell a story about the divorce of my parents. Something is making you brave. Something's making you get closer and closer to the cornstalk. It was a childhood fantasy to tell the story of a best friend and a special friend who rescues a young boy from the sadness of a divorce.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Cut. Great. Judy. Okay, very nice. Good for the charge? E.T. sort of came about in stages for me. Close Encounters, which I made in the mid-'70s, was a movie, really, it was really the original movie, and E.T., therefore, is the sequel.
One of the things that really, really inspired me to want to work with Steven was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And so when I did, in fact, find myself eventually working with Steven, one of the things that we talked a lot about was the research that he had done during the making of Close Encounters with a man named Hynek. And he asked me to go investigate a particular case.
Having to do with a farm family that was terrorized one evening by gremlin-like extraterrestrials that surrounded the house and kept trying to gain access to the house and rode the cows through the barnyard and made the people crazy.
And I'd seen this movie called Return of the Secaucus 7. I was intrigued with John Sayles, and I went running downstairs after the screening to meet him. And I said, I love the writing in your movie, and I think you might be perfect for this project that I'm working on with Steven Spielberg. Could you come meet with us? We gave him the research on Night Skies, and he wrote the first draft of Night Skies.
But when I read the script, I just didn't feel that was a movie that I wanted to direct. It was too violent. And that's when everything kind of like changed in my mind, and it sort of became, I'm not going to make that movie, but I might make this movie. The movie's called E.T., which stands for Extra-Terrestrial, which is about a visit to this planet by a space creature. This concept hit me. I knew exactly how to tell the story of E.T., and the story began to flood into my mind. And for the next couple of days, E.T. pretty much had a beginning, a middle, and an end. The movie's about a children's world through their eyes and about things that happen to them in contemporary, suburban living. I was going to do E.T. for Columbia, and they liked the script, but Columbia chose another movie they had in development called Starman that eventually became a wonderful movie starring Jeff Bridges. They chose that over E.T., and they said, but look, we're not going to make your movie, but we'll certainly give it back to you to take anywhere you'd like. And I got the rights back and took it immediately to Sid Sheinberg, my mentor, my friend, and the head of Universal Studios. And I showed him the script to decide whether he wanted to make the movie or not. And the next day he called up and he said, I think it's a very good idea for a movie. Go ahead and do it. So we set off to make the picture at that time. It's been much less difficult than most of the other movies I've tackled because it's a much smaller, more contained story. One of the reasons I wanted to do it. In my own film life, I was ready for a small movie. This is about as small as they get for me anyway. Good. Now pack a little bit more to your left. Take a step to your left. A whole step to your left. Right there. Good. I went off to try to find a designer for my single creature. And I went over to Carlo Rambaldi, who had done my creature in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And simply, I love Carlo's designs. Ed Verreau had been sketching E.T.'s face with me at my beach house on weekends, and we gave Carlo about 4 or 5 or 6 sketches that Ed had done.
In the early stages, we didn't really know what E.T. was going to look like because we were just sort of talking about him, okay? I think that we actually, at some point fairly early on, had set down some ground rules. That is that E.T. isn't a monster.
E.T. is probably from Alpha Centauri or Beetlejuice. I remember saying to Carlo, here's some pictures of Albert Einstein, Ernest Hemingway, and Carl Sandburg. I love their eyes. Can we make E.T.'s eyes as frivolous and wizened and as sad as those three icons.
The thing I really remember very specifically working with Steven was actually going into his office and his having all these books and saying, here, those are neat eyes, that's a neat mouth, look at this person. And I mean, they were really interesting because there would be some very, very, very old people, and you'd get these very old wizened eyes and stuff. And we would just draw a lot of stuff. We would just basically shotgun. And then we would go back to Steven's office and we would basically pin the stuff up on the wall, and then Steven would look at them and say, well, you know, I like that, or I like a bit of this, or that's an interesting nose, or whatever.
And finally, this creature did emerge after a couple of weeks that was E.T., that became E.T. E.T.'s eyes should be a little more to camera left. Look at Drew, fine. Okay, Drew, looking at him. Kathy went off and found Beverly, who worked at the Jules Stein Eye Institute, and came on board and did this wonderful job of making a rather oversized glass eye for us. Okay, the minute you see the light come on, start your pushing, okay? Okay. And I just said, you know, whatever E.T. looks like inside, I want to be able to see his organs. When he turns on his heart light, I want to be able to see the organs around the light moving and kind of breathing and moving in a strange way. And I think it was Craig Reardon and Short who said, well, I understand from your script that you think E.T. is a plant. And I said, yeah, I think he's a vegetable. And they said, well, we have this concept of maybe making his insides look a bit like a plant. Would that be okay? I said, that's fantastic. Go ahead and do it. So they had this idea of doing something very plant-like with the inside of E.T.
I dreamed that there was real ETs. And you know, there's like one and he was in the house playing with, all of a sudden he heard this giant noise. We went outside, then there's this spaceship. No, really, I had this dream.
One of my jobs as associate producer and writer was to rehearse with the kids, and it was great fun because they're just a lot of fun to hang out with.
You've come to a dark hallway.
Oh, wait.
Go down it.
And we'd rehearse, and they would catch me on misspellings, or they'd give me a bad time about some piece of dialogue, or they'd come up with something they thought was better, and I finally had to kind of show them who was boss, I think, at some point, tell them that I was the writer. They were the kids. They'd have to do what I said.
It was nothing like that, penis breath.
Elliot, sit down.
It was very strange as a child with things like that, because I had been brought up, you know, kids just didn't say those kind of things, you know. In fact, I got away from saying holy shit. I just had to say penis breath, and that wasn't that bad, you know, because it was an anatomical term, I guess. Right? So I think Grandma could live with that one.
They were very funny, but it was just a very fun experience to get to work with them that way.
Tell them what it is.
Yeah.
She's great too. She was so nice and gave such great energy. You know, you would want to sit down with her. You know, because kids, I mean, sometimes they don't have the largest attention spans. I don't remember ever being impatient on this film. You know, I was always like, you want to work? No problem, let's go.
I want you to take 5 steps back and run into this position for your screen. Right now, take 5 steps back. Okay, right there. And run, and you'll be looking right here and run right in that position for screen. Okay, ready? And when I say go, and go. Mom! Melissa did something that no one's ever done for me on a movie that I directed before or even since. And that is, she put every day's work on cards. She put the entire script of that day on 3x5 cards. So these cards gave me amazing confidence. Rather than going through the unwieldy script, instead I had these little cards, and I was suddenly kind of liberated. I was unencumbered by the script and all that. I can walk around these cards in my pants pocket or my shirt pocket, pull them out and say, okay, this is what I'm shooting right now. And the cards somehow gave me the freedom to be able to go to the kids and say, here's what's on the card, and we'll do these lines, but let's make it up at the same time. What would you say if this really happened to you?
The fish eat the fish food, and the shark eats the fish.
Steven wasn't afraid to let kids be kids and bring something new to the film. He had this table set up in Elliot's bedroom. There was just all this junk on there, you know, just Star Wars toys and gadgets and everything. And he said, okay, well, what I want you to do is, you've brought him to your room, show him what's on your table, you know, go down the line and just, you know, introduce everything you can.
Hey, wait a second. No, you don't eat them. Are you hungry? I'm hungry.
It should be a smorgasbord on the table. We're going to make him the first junk food addict from Alpha Centauri.
You know, you're a little overwhelmed when you meet a director like Steven Spielberg because just of who he is. So you come in with all this baggage and expectation, you know.
And action.
I just remember being very comfortable and being made to feel very much at home, and the kids were just great to hang out with.
Is that gum in there or deformed teeth? Gum. Good.
God, Drew.
Drew took to me instantly. I mean, she was on my lap all the time. I have 2 or 3 pictures of home from the first day on the set where she's on my lap, and she is my daughter. She could very well be my daughter, who is 7 now, my own daughter.
If you believe, clap your hands.
Well, this movie is fun because it has a lot of kids, and yet some other movies don't have as much kids and you can't play with anybody. You get lonely.
No, I weigh 80 pounds.
That's not enough.
Okay.
You gotta get frying chicken. Get him. You ready? Okay.
On E.T. we had school because it's required by California state law that if you're filming a movie, the kids have to still attend some sort of school.
Talk to Henry about the subject. I hate school. I'm always negative about it.
No.
Aren't you supposed to be working? Would you turn around and do your work, please?
Sometimes I would have a difficult time because we'd work really hard and then we would get a break, and I think we'd want to go and play, and we would be told we'd have to go back to school. And I think sometimes I'd be like, wait a minute, I just worked. I want to play a little bit, you know?
It was strange because most schools you go to, if you're in a class, you know, you're in with people your own age. And everybody that was in school was, you know, ranging from Drew, who was 7, to me, who was 14.
Henry can take a break for a few minutes to go to school, and we'll get the reverse, but I want to...
The hardest part about it is going to school for 20-minute increments and then going back to work.
Yeah.
And you finish a shot and you want to relax and think about the next shot or what you're going to be doing next, and you have to go back to school and jump into something like geography or history or something, or math.
What I want you to do is do that row, and then I'll check it.
Okay. Here he is.
Where's who?
Man from the movie, but I think you killed him already.
I had a really hard time not laughing during that scene because, you know, E.T. was just being so funny, you know, and I had a really hard time pulling it together. I also love that scene because, you know, that's the scene where Mom is just completely oblivious to E.T. and I'm so focused in on him and setting up the be good and, you know, with all the bees and, you know, sort of getting the wavelength, you know, you want to call somebody, and I had a really good time with that scene. So I think all day long I was playing very hard and everything was coming very naturally, you know. There was definitely good energy in the air that day.
Yeah.
And I knew you were drunk in the classroom.
Yeah,
all as well.
That's school drunk.
The intestines will be going through their peristaltic action.
The toughest thing Henry had to do that he didn't want to do is on the first day of shooting, he had to kiss the girl on the lips. You grab with your left hand, and then while you have her here, both hands you switch. Like that. Let's try that.
You're like disco dancing.
And he didn't want to do this, and he didn't want to be a movie actor. At that moment, I saw his entire career. He was giving it all up. Like that, down, then step up, and then look her in the eyes, and you take.
That was the one part in the script. I remember sitting down reading it for the first time, going, okay, spaceship, cool. Alien, cool. Kissing a girl, no way, I have to do this.
Okay, background. Okay, David, go, action. Work on.
I remember I thought that we'd only have to do it once. I stood on the guy's back, I grabbed her and I pulled her to me with such force that we like crashed teeth. Like front teeth just smash.
Wait a minute, wait.
And she was like, oh, okay, that's it. You know, and I was like, oh, good, that's over with, finally. Yeah. Why do people like that, you know? And then I realized I was doing it wrong, and then, yeah, but Steven made me do that like 3 or 4 times. Got a big kick out of it.
Okay,
You ready for more? Tiger? All right, he's cooling off. He's cooling off. It's fine.
I think still I have yet to have as much fun on a movie as I did on this one.
Yeah.
Truly. I remember like Halloween. Remember Halloween?
Halloween was great.
We had such a good time, and Steven dressed up as this old lady, and it was so brilliant.
Yes. I'm enjoying this. I might never come out of this, as a matter of fact. There's a lot of advantages. Social advantages, another way. For one thing, look at all those pretty colors you can wear.
He directed the whole day as an old lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
He would be, behind the camera with his high heels, and he looked really great, too.
Yeah. Now, here's what's going to happen here. Can I explain this to you guys? There's going to be a three-way screaming match. But major vocalist here in the center. We're all singing at the same time, exactly. I wasn't a dad. I didn't have children back in the early 80s, and suddenly I was becoming a father. Every single day I felt like I was Drew's father, Henry's father, and Robert's father, and it felt good. And I think I have a big family now because it felt pretty good having 3 kids back then. It's impossible. You guys...
Will you tell my fortune? I don't think I have it today. Oh, come on.
Hello, my love.
Hi, Granny.
Wait a sec. Drew, this is for you, my darling. This is your candy apple. But don't eat it until it's cool.
Henry!
My dear, your apple. Come on, your apple.
We would have so much fun. We really would.
Yeah, it was fun.
I think he gave us all a great emotional balance when we were working, because it was fun, but we were responsible kids, you know? Professional.
That's right. Professional.
E.T. Farnham. E.T. Farnham. Really? Really? Are you really alive? Alive!
When I did the picture, I had to give off-camera dialogue, and rather than just have the script person read the dialogue out loud in a normal tone of voice, I began to say things like, E.T. phone home. Or I would say things like, Elliot. Yeah, you guys have to talk through that. So, Elliot. That became the temp track. But then my friend Deborah Winger, I loved her voice. She had a really low, husky, beautiful voice. And one day, Deborah came over to visit, and I said, can you come over and do every single E.T. line in the script for me to a tape recorder? And Deborah took the script and did every single voice. So anybody and everybody who saw the rough cut of E.T. heard a couple lines of mine, actually still in the movie, but most of all, they heard Deborah Winger's voice and never knew it was Deborah doing all the voice inside the rough cut. And then Ben Burt found Pat Welsh.
She was not an actress, and although she had always wanted to be an actress, and in fact had briefly pursued ambitions in those directions sometime back in the 1930s or 40s, I explained to her what I was trying to do and would she be interested in auditioning. And took her inside and had her do some readings. E.T. home phone. So I took her voice and I changed it just a little bit electronically. I changed the pitch and lowered it just a little bit. I would mix her voice with the breathing or the inhale and exhale of one of the animal sounds that I had recorded, something that was sort of non-human. All told, there were 18 different contributors to the voice of E.T., including the animals, as well as the various human characters who might have provided a snort or a burp. There's scenes when E.T. gets drunk, and I used some vocalizations from my old cinema professor at USC, Ken Mura. I guess he plays a good drunk alien, I don't know. There were some other children and friends of mine that I recorded breathing and making funny noises. I really just collected a lot of different pieces of things to put it all together.
Gertie, come here, come on.
I got a Yoda costume and didn't tell George Lucas I was doing this and dressed someone up as Yoda. And I just had this idea, it'd be really fun, that as E.T. walks by, Yoda's going in the other direction, but E.T. recognizes Yoda. Because, of course, the galaxy is a rather small place among filmmakers.
I hadn't seen E.T. finished, and when we finally finished, it had a screen up here for ILM. And well, Steve had warned me that there was something special in it for me, and so suddenly Yoda showed up in the film. Everybody in the audience cheered, of course, because it's an ILM screening, but I really loved it. I mean, I was amazed and flattered, and You know, it was a very funny moment.
I just remember George was sitting right next to me, and when Yoda came on the screen, George gave me a little nudge with his arm. I guess it's his way of saying that was cool.
I really think that a big part of the reason the movie hasn't aged very much and it feels somewhat timeless is because, in a sense, it was never designed to be an effects movie. Even with ILM, the contribution was seamless. And it's because we didn't want to say, oh, isn't that a great effects shot? We wanted it to look like we'd actually shot that perfect night moon.
When that shot came up, it just seemed like, you know, we should do this with a real moon. We should get as much realism into this as we can. And so Mike McAllister, I had him go out and scout locations around here to find a place to do that. So we got charts out and hills and everything and we wanted to find the trees. And I think it took about a week. You know, in the afternoon you'd go out for 3 or 4 hours and find the right spot to be able to do it. And then I think we shot it for 2 nights and got 2 or 3 versions of it. That was about all we got in that time. And it's all real. And then we just laid the bike into it. The work that we had all done, the whole team had done on E.T. got us an Academy Award for visual effects, which was really, you know, exciting. It's always great to be recognized by everybody.
Alan, I'm going to look inside the tube. I haven't seen it yet.
Uh-huh. The blower's not on yet, Steven, but you can't. Yeah, no, you can go on in. It's self-supporting right now.
I remember that in the earlier scripts, E.T. and Elliot were always, when they fell ill, taken to a hospital. And I remember scouting hospital after hospital. We couldn't find a hospital we really liked.
Is there any guarantee you can get me out once it falls and sandwiches me into the... There we go. Pull that taut.
Now, the way I remember it is that Steven came in from an international flight. And at the time, at Los Angeles International Airport, they were building the Bradley terminal. And they had a temporary structure erected for international flights. And it was one of these big pneumatic structures. Well, he had the idea, which was absolutely brilliant and psychologically so appropriate, to take the whole thing and bring it back to the home, which is this warm, comfortable environment that we've gotten used to where the kids are growing up turns into a nightmare.
And it made a lot of sense to me that the house would be the place that the government would seal up, shut down the neighborhood surrounding it, and do their work there.
Stephen liked the idea very much, and he said, go ahead with it. Well, at that point we went, great, and I had no idea how to do it. So we talked to our friends down in Field Tech, and they manufactured this 90-foot by 120-foot piece of polyvinyl chloride. It was one of the biggest sheets they'd ever fabricated, and they were a primary subcontractor to the Army. They create some of these clean rooms for computer equipment in wartime conditions.
We shot on location all the night exterior scenes at the Northridge location and the Sunland Tahunga location. And then when we wound up on stage, it was so great to have the kind of control that a sound stage gives you.
This is the emergency ward where we all must go when this movie's over to get cleaned out. Assigning the whole crew to Senior Sinai for a week's convalescence from me. Henry, that was great.
Okay, quietly
Let me
now.
see where Henry was and let me get a quick punch in.
And of course I loved the textures of the plastic inside, and the scene where E.T. dies and they go and put him in the coffin, and Elliot's goodbye to E.T. in the coffin is so wonderful. The house is viewed through the diffusion of these pieces of plastic. It's almost like you've muted the house around him, and it turned out, what seemed to be horrifying turned out to be one of the great opportunities of the film.
Well, in this shot, Michael, Robert McNaughton, is going to drive the van forward because he's never driven forward before. And we have 2 men who are still inside the tube when the tube first takes off. They fall when it first lurches out, and they get back on their feet when it stops the second time, and they fall a second time when it takes off. Again. I don't know if it'll be hilarious, it'll be hard. It'll be hard to do.
And cut!
That scene was kind of hard because, for one thing, I was late to the set that day, which I'd never been late before or since. I mean, that was really bad. We had trouble finding the location, and the instant I got there, they threw me in this blue, completely airtight plastic radiation suit or something. And it was so bad. It was like 80 degrees outside. It was probably 120 inside the suit in the van with the windows rolled up. After every take, they'd have to open the door and take my glove off and empty the sweat out.
When I say be deliberate, that's very carefully, loud and angry, but one word after the other, and don't break eye contact. Okay?
And I remember Steven giving me really good advice about how to play the scene, and it just put a picture in my mind of what he wanted and the effect that it would have, you know.
Now I want you to take this thing off, like Richard the Lionhearted in Robin Hood, when he drops his monk's habit and reveals his crusading colors.
His suggestions would always be, a lot of them would be in movie terms or in, you know, in stuff we could relate to.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, okay. And action! Casey.
Michael! Get the bikes. Meet us at the playground at the top of the hill.
When I say action, we get the speed. I want you to yell to Henry, where are we going?
Where are we going?
To the forest!
You'll walk all the way from here, right over to ET, and you'll take your position in front of him.
Here we go, once again.
All of the goodbye scene and watching the spaceship leave, all of that wasn't actually in the Redwoods, because they had an amazing mock-up of the Redwoods built on a soundstage.
Steven taught me through it, and he acted like he was E.T., you know, saying that he was leaving, he'd never see me again, stuff like that. I felt like I was really Elliot.
I want to turn the spotlight off so we can just be on more silhouette on the grate.
I never read the script of E.T. that contained any description of the spaceship that I can recall. My recollection is that Steven asked me to meet him here at ILM, and he described the spaceship in a few words. It could be something that looked like Dr. Seuss designed it, sort of an off-the-wall contraption. And that was really his whole description of it. Just go ahead and see what you can come up with, you know.
Ralph McQuarrie contributed the entire design from scratch of the spaceship. And he had this great concept on his own to do a bobble, just an oval, just a complete circle, with a very reflective mylar surface that would reflect the trees of the forest in Northern California. And it was a wonderful concept. And he made this very kind of quixotic rendering where the E.T. spaceship looked a bit like E.T. It was squat, it had legs, and had little kind of like feet that went out from under it. I just fell in love with the design and just said, that's it, let's build it.
I guess because E.T. is small, I made it small. I wanted a kind of charming spaceship. I didn't want an awesome spaceship. I envisioned the thing lifting off very quietly with the sound of a burner on a hot air balloon. It just floats up and it almost disappears. And then it kind of speeds off into the distance, leaving a contrail like a jet aircraft would leave.
What do we have for that time of the year? We have 3 pictures. Well, of course, they could be switched around. We have Conan, which is an adult adventure movie. Right. Or really a tough R, yeah, you know. It's going to do business, I think. Yeah. We have Dead Men Don't Wear Play, which is shooting here. That's Steve Martin. Yeah. And we have The Dark Crystal. Yeah. Now, Dark Crystal. It's somewhat competitive.
It is.
Dark Crystal is competitive.
Only because it creates an environment of its own. It creates a world of its own.
I would sit in the trailer and Steven would be worried that this film was too personal and too this and too that, and everybody was nervous and trying to come up with a title and the this and the that, and there's just a lot of effort going into making a film.
Extra-Terrestrial, though, gives it a kind of a bigger...
And it's an encyclopedia. I call it an encyclopedia title. It's something you look up if you're interested, but it didn't hurt Close Encounters, it didn't hurt The Exorcist.
And I didn't understand exactly what was going on until I was down in Florida and I was making a film called Cross Creek with Martin Ritt. And E.T., I guess, was just starting to have industry screenings then. And I noticed that members of the crew were coming up and sort of touching my garments and asking me about E.T. You know, hey, we heard you were in that movie, E.T. It was like a talismanic behavior the good luck was going to rub off. And I thought, this is weird. Then the momentum began to occur. And when I saw the movie, I thought, this is going to be a big movie.
Previews today are done a different way than the way that we previewed E.T. We previewed E.T. as more or less a finished film. In other words, it had its own score, and its own mix. We had several screenings for ourselves so that we could judge the film and make changes, but we essentially finished the film before it was previewed.
The sneak preview of E.T. was a religious experience. It was emotional, it was loving, it was generous on the audience's part, and it was a love fest. It really was.
I remember Steven sitting next to me and kept pounding on my leg. And in fact, I had black and blue marks because he kept squeezing and pounding, going, they're laughing, they like it, they like it.
Everybody paid complete attention, and there was a real feeling of identification. You could just slice the atmosphere.
And I think that's when we just had a little hint that this might be kind of big.
We were all just soaring, but it was not until the Cannes Film Festival. It was almost a phenomenon, you know. We took the film out of competition to Cannes on the last night.
And about 15 minutes before the end of the movie, people started to clap and stomp their feet. And we thought, what is this? You know, because first of all, your stomach's churning and you're nervous and you think, oh my God, they don't like the movie. And then we realized it was just the opposite. They loved the movie.
And then at the end of the festival, we had like a 15-minute standing ovation. And I remember I kept standing up and sitting down.
Then this light comes on, and it starts like this searchlight over all of us, finding us at the top of this balcony.
And I was getting embarrassed, and I turned to Melissa and made her get up and sit down. She got tired. Then everybody around me, I kept, take a bow.
It was just this amazing experience. I've never, ever been through anything like it since.
I looked down at one person who wasn't clapping, just holding up a little, cigarette lighter, and the flame was standing out, and it was Jerry Lewis, just holding up this lighter, which was a wonderful thing to see Jerry smiling, and it was that will never be equaled.
And then I think he would agree that one of the most spectacular telegrams that he got, and he got many, many telegrams, stacks of telegrams while we were at Cannes, was from Truffaut.
I got this little telegram from Francois Truffaut, and the telegram, which meant so much to me, said, "You belong here more than me," echoing Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, that just broke me up.
I cried.
Yeah, I did too.
I was really mad at myself because I swore that I wouldn't, because
Really?
I figured it would be very sort of cheesy for an actor to cry in their own movie, and you can't help it.
No.
You can't. I was crying my eyes out, and I remember thanking my lucky stars that the world had a movie like this.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was. I remember the first time I'd ever viewed it, I came out and I said, I had to pass out crying towels, to the audience, because it was very moving, and I remember everybody in the theater was in tears.
Everyone. There was. The term "not a dry eye on the house," I think, if it wasn't created there, it definitely applies.
I think it was great. I think Steven did a good job. I think everyone did a good job, and I think they were really nice to us on the set. They really were. Ugh. Last time, remember how far? I think it was around the block. I think it was, wasn't it? It was.
Everything sort of changed after that. And also it was very, very overwhelming, but in a great way. Oh, in a really good way.
Yeah. It's odd because I remember being really bitter, though, as like an 11-year-old boy, because I couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything, I was kind of a prisoner in my own home for about a year. If people didn't recognize me right away, I would look familiar to them somehow,
We were on every blanket and tea set and comb and brush in America too,
Yeah.
We were talking about the merchandise. It wasn't just a movie anymore, and all of a sudden you couldn't eat a meal without somebody coming up to you. And trying to embrace life on that level, I think, was hard, being as young as we were. But I know that, we did it really well, which is really cool. We didn't go too well. I did go crazy there for a minute, but
yeah. She's all right now.
Henry kept it together a lot better than I did. But I think we're pretty well balanced people now.
Can somebody pin the blanket right here to the arm, very gently, right over here? We've always sort of regard him as a living, breathing organism. He's a real creature. I think he's for me, he's the eighth wonder
in my experience, you know, the eighth wonder of the movie world. Because it was a one-time event in my life. It was a one-time event, I think, in a lot of people who saw the movie's lives. It opened me up to more personal stories. It was, in a way, a ladder on a course of a kind of personal movie about human characters and human exploits and the human condition, as opposed to the other movies, which are much more, you know, adventures and films like Jaws and the Raiders films and Jurassic Park. So my career's sort of gone, you know, on two different roads that parallel one another. There's this kind of film, there's that kind of film. And I think E.T. gave me the courage to start creating that kind of film.
Let's just do a rehearsal on film. David, let me see how big your eyes can go when he steps on you. He says, "Stay, Elliot." Everybody together like he's talking. He's talking. Oh, it's lovely. Cut. Beautiful. Beautiful. Lovely. I like that.
You know what?
What?
You were good.
That was good? Well, these kids are so nice. What would you do with all the money in the world?
Send it to the hospital and be a nurse.
And be a nurse?
I'm just kidding. If I had all the money in the world, I would take all the dogs in the pet. Every pet shop, I would take all the dogs. I would make them in a farm, even horses.
A dog farm?
Horses? You want to buy some horses? I love horses.
I love horses too.
No, really. Really, I had this dream. And there was a spaceship. And then these little ETs walked out. We just took them inside. We played D&D with them inside. No, really.
What do you think, Henry?
I think it's my day off today.
Yeah? DT's big day.
Yeah.
Looks like you need a rest.
Okay, everybody, clear the monitor
Face
for a minute
finger
while
attack.
you-
5 days.
Ah. We had an amazing thing last night. They found some guy fishing who happened to be a cordon bleu chef in La Jolla. And he volunteered on his own to come down and prepare this incredible crab bisque with about 75 live crab.
Roger, we brought in special. Stephen wanted bisque, we went to the top.
That's right. Henry, take off your mask so we can see. And Robert, put your mask on your head so we can see who it is. Here we are. Ah, now watch the birdie, everybody. Woo! Want to see this? Somebody cheer up Drew Barrymore, please. Here we go. And Harpo's back there.
Face, take the face.
Thanks, everybody. Oh,
Welcome.
what a group shot.
Want to ask me some questions about the movie or something, guys? You got me cornered here.